Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. Today, we're going to be talking about Datamart, cubes, and other storage. Now, it's going to be a little bit different than some of our past talks here at Dashboard Gear, where we're not going to be talking about specific technologies, but rather I get asked a bunch about what is the difference between a data lake, a data warehouse, a data mart, a cube, what should I use, what do I need? So I want to kind of demystify some of that and clarify what some of those terms mean, when and why you should use each of those, and kind of go from there. So without further ado here, I'm going to switch over to the slides and we'll go through it. As I mentioned earlier, there are many different ways to store data. Now, the first question I get is, of these types of data, which should I use? And my answer is going to be you need all of them. Now, that sounds a little bit daunting and a little overwhelming, but what that really means is within your organization, you're going to use all of these technologies. As an individual user, you probably only need to be concerned about one or two of them. And I'll get into what the differences are between them. Now, I get into a lot of debates with various DBAs and data architects and people about these topics and other vendors, quite honestly. And the reason for that is they all typically come at it from a particular agenda that they're trying to push, as far as, do it our way, because this is how we do it, versus this is the best approach that you have depending on the need that you have. So it's a lot like a political debate between if someone tried to describe what a Democrat is or a Republican or various religions, which I'm not going to get into any of that today, but these discussions can go that way very quickly. So with those kind of caveats in place, I'm going to give you the definitions in each of these areas in a generic way. And if you're a purist on one of these, don't get after me on that. Or if you want to, you can, but it's probably best saved for a happy hour discussion on that. So what I'm going to do is first break down and get into the first topic, which is a data lake. So this is a newer topic, but one that's pretty popular now with the cloud technologies that are in place. And the question comes about, what is a data lake? A data lake, as I've put down here, is a centralized place to store your data, structured and unstructured. And the data is just put in there as is. Now, the onus on that data, on the user of that data, is to understand how to use it. So you as an application developer, so take, we do a lot of work with Infor, let's say, an Infor financial app, rather than figuring out how to store that, they can just send the data to the data lake. An HR app can put the data to the data lake. So it's really like a dumping ground of the data. Whoever's going to use that data, it's really up to them to understand how and why they want to use that data. So it's a great storage mechanism to kind of gather a bunch of information together. Now, the last sentence I put here, it's usually a push metaphor. And what I mean by that is usually each application is just pushing it to the data lake. It's usually not something from the data lake grabbing it from an application. It's usually pushed into the data lake. And that really goes into the next type of data storage I want to talk about, which is a data warehouse. So a data warehouse is also a centralized place to store your data. Now, these have gotten good press and bad press and everything in between. There are people that are very strong zealots on data warehousing and want it in a specific way, and this is the way it goes. Many organizations I work with actually either have a data warehouse or are building a data warehouse or are frustrated with their data warehouse, and for the reason that it gets abused. And what a data warehouse is a centralized place, but the data, unlike a data lake, is much more structured and curated. So care is taken as far as which data to put in there, and more importantly, how that data is put in there. So the data is structured. The tables are designed. It's picked out as far as what goes in there. So it's not so much of a dumping ground, but more of a gathering place of structured data for the enterprise. And that really is another part of the keys, is that typically a data warehouse is for a broader audience. It's for the enterprise. Now, the mechanisms that are usually used to load a data warehouse usually are from a pull mechanism. And what I mean by that is usually there's code put into the data warehouse, or some kind of tool like an ETL tool is used with the warehouse that pulls the data from the various source systems and puts it into the warehouse for the storage. Then the users in the enterprise can use that data because it's already been cleaned up, stored, and put in a specific way. Now, most of the time with a warehouse, someone on the warehouse team has gone through and defined what the data is. They create a data dictionary and some of those things around that because it's much more organized. So that's really the difference between a data lake and a data warehouse. Now, the topic on today's title that I put down was really around data marts, cubes, and so forth. So what's the difference between a data mart and a data warehouse? A data mart really is a area or subject specific location for that data that's gathered. So it tends to be, unlike a data warehouse where it's enterprise wide and across boundaries, a data mart typically is in place to solve a particular department or business area's needs with their data. So good examples are the finance department, a sales department, human resources. The data is put in there in such a way that solves their need. Now, typically that data is much broader within those areas. So maybe it has all of financial data, and that's probably a little bit of an abuse to say all of it, but it has a bigger set of the financial data than typically goes into the data warehouse, where the financial data that goes into the data warehouse is the data that's needed by the broader audience, versus a data mart is everything needed by that particular department's needs. Now, the technologies that you can use can be all over the board, from a standard SQL server to some people would call shared spreadsheets a type of data mart. So it's really just a way of storing data for a particular area's needs. Now, I find that a great model to use is to use these in combination with the data warehouse that's there, as well as the data lake. And so that's why I said at the beginning that you really need all of these. You can allow each business area to be in control of their own data mart as far as what data they want, what they need. So accountants know what they need to do month-end close and reconciliation, all of that. Users in a data warehouse don't need to know the details needed to do postings for reconciliation and month-end close and all of that. That's not the point. So the areas themselves can kind of curate the data mart and be there. Now, it might need a centralized team of technology people to help with that, but the purpose and the driver of the data mart is that. And that really is a lot of the frustration when I start working with organizations, is there's a data warehouse or a data team that's in place. And what happens is they control it, which they should in the data warehouse greatly. But what that does is it makes it almost impossible for each subject area to use, because it's not broad enough, or it doesn't move fast enough, or it doesn't accomplish their needs, because they're very different goals. So don't confuse the needs of a data mart with the needs of a data warehouse. They're very different. They can be related. Now, people have taken different tacks on this, and that's where I go back to that religious discussion, where some people say they take a data warehouse, put all the data there, and then they take the parts from it for each department and they make data marts out of that. I don't like that model, and for the reason of, I believe the data mart typically has a lot more data than you put into a data warehouse. So instead, I'm much more of a proponent of saying, build a robust data mart in each area. And from that data mart, you can populate the data warehouse with what is needed from that area. That also gives the power to each area to kind of curate and control what financial data, let's say, we want to share with the organization, or what sales data from the sales staff. So it kind of breaks up those responsibilities. Now, it does require each of those areas to have some people that are somewhat data savvy. But I believe, in today's business world, the culture really needs to shift to much more data centric. So it is right in line with that. Now, there are a lot of confusions with this next type of data, analytic cubes, and people confuse these as being data marts as well, and they're really not. An analytic cube is really a type of technology or data storage that sits on the data. The difference between this and a traditional data mart or a SQL-based data mart, our cubes are a technical way of storing the data kind of in an array, and those arrays are optimized for analytics and exploration of data. They are terrible at details. And so people tend to abuse cubes by trying to use those to do reports and listings and so forth out of them, when in reality, they're much better at metrics or finding patterns in data, correlations, trends, that kind of thing. So less around the details and more around that. So when you hear a term cube, it's not equal to a data mart. A cube can sit on top of a data mart. And what I mean by that is it can restructure the data in an array on top of that to serve the data for analytics and so forth. But it is not the same thing as a data mart. So don't confuse those with that. So really at the end of the day, that's what I wanted to get through in this topic, was just kind of distill some of the mystery and some of the myths about what each of those are, and then reemphasize you really do need all of those as part of your tool belt. Now, there's no one right or wrong technology to use. You get someone from SQL Server or Oracle or DB2 or Microsoft Access or Amazon, or you put all of those, they all have a solution across all of these. So it's not really about a specific type of technology. It's about understanding more the concepts of why and when to use each of those data structures, how to properly manage those, and then put those in. So hopefully you found today's topic helpful. If in the future you have any other suggestions of what you want to go through, please do send us at info@dashboardgear.com. We're constantly looking for new ways to share the data with you and get you some additional information. If you do want to contact us, there's myself, Rich Bendixson from Dashboard Gear, with my number, as well as Tom Zidell, who is in our sales organization. We'd be happy to help you out with whatever topics you have, and we look forward to talking with you again next week. Thank you.